Hi, my name is Mary Ann. Spiral provides support to young people aged 8 to 25 across Cumbria. If you are experiencing issues around bullying, including increased anger, low mood and anxious thoughts, you can possibly access our one-to-one support. Or if you are a young person feeling lonely, you can access Spiral's peer community. Just go to www.spiralcumbria.org.uk where there is more information on the services Spiral provides, including resources for parents.
So I just want to give like a little bit of an introduction here before we start. This is myself, I'm Sol, and Scott. We're going to be doing a podcast together through Spiral, which is a company that I work for. Scott recently has become a volunteer for, which we're very grateful of. And this is our first podcast, our first episode that we've ever done, either of us, for anything. We've never really done anything like this really before. And we're just going to see how it goes. We really want to push this because we feel like, you know, if we can help one person with what we talk about, then we've done a good job and it was worth it. So this is going to be the first episode. We're kind of talking a little bit about, you know, like what bullying is and the effects it can have. And I hope you guys enjoy. And if you could leave any kind of constructive criticism that you think of during the podcast, that'd be great, because like I said, this is the first time me and Scott have done anything like this before.
We were talking about before, wasn't it? It was about what bullying is, and you know, I think that's an important conversation to kind of start off with, really.
Definitely, you kind of need to explore what it is before you can talk about like kind of how to stop the effects and what's happening. But I mean, yeah, we just kind of gave a brief introduction there. And I think we're going to bring a lot. I mean, you're kind of got like a more like view from the outside. You know, you've got children, you can see how it's kind of affecting them. Yeah. You know, I just finished school. I'm only 20 years old. I finished it a couple of years ago. I went through college for a few years, and I'm kind of like fresh out of that. I've still got a lot of things, you know, in my mind, and I've seen a lot of things. I've experienced a lot of things. I think we're going to be able to combine that quite well.
Yeah, it seems perfect because I'm sort of old over the hill. But the thing is one of the things is that bullying's always been there. You know, as a child, which I can just about remember now. Bullying was there. I think the main difference is, and I don't want to go too far, but I think the biggest difference I find is that bullying is always bad. There's never an excuse for bullying. Yeah. The saving grace is a phrase I like to use, is when I was a child, if there was people that were experiencing bullying, at least it stopped at the school gates. That's not dismissing how devastating the bullying was in school and could be, but now with cyberbullying, with online bullying, people can't get away from it, which makes it even harder to deal with. I mean, the important thing is as I said, is that not everybody recognises what bullying is. Yeah. Sometimes, and I've seen it before, where people have said to me, "Oh, that's all right, it's not a problem." And I've been quite uncomfortable with what someone said. So, what are your thoughts on what is bullying, and how can it?
I mean, it's a very broad thing, isn't it? Bullying can range from just like, you know, like picking on someone like on a regular basis, calling them names, just kind of shoving them out of your circle groups, to a lot more physical, you know, a lot more online stuff, a lot more psychological, and just kind of repetitive, you know, like getting into people's heads and kind of making them feel not, you know, how the average person is kind of supposed to feel and how we would really want them to feel in society. And
I mean, I suppose if I was to think of bullying, my first thought would probably be physical bullying.
Definitely, yeah.
You know, hitting, pushing. Yeah. But that's just one type of bullying. There's the emotional side of things, and I have experienced it myself when I was young. Not personally, but I did experience it growing up. A guy that I knew pretty well, although he didn't fit into a social group, and he was excluded from that social group. Yeah. It was less definable. It was less clear that he was being bullied. Now I think we'd probably be more aware of it. But then, what would happen is he wouldn't be invited to the groups. Yeah. He would be deliberately excluded. Now, many people would say that isn't bullying, but for me, that is bullying, because this is a person that wants to have a social life, is friends with other people, but because of the fact that he's not included, his mental health dramatically declined, and unfortunately he became very unwell, and he did actually take his own life. and it wasn't over a short period; it was a long period of time. But no one was aware of it. I mean, I was a friend of it. I didn't know how he was what he was experiencing, how he was experiencing, and we will touch on it later. But it's also very important to be able to raise the fact that you've been bullied, and as I said, we will talk about that. But I think it's also important to work out and to understand that what one person sees as bullying, another person may not.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
we all have banter, whatever phrase you want to use, we all have a laugh with each other. We can all take the mickey out of each other, and that can be part of friendship groups. Yeah. That can be normal, but it's at what point does that not become normal? What point does that, And I think this is where it's important to have the conversation we're having, because it's really important that if you're uncomfortable with something, you've got to say, I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main issues right now. I mean, like you just said before, is when you think of bullying, the first thing that does come to my mind is hitting someone, flushing their head down the toilet in the bathroom.
But you do. It's in films, stories, novels, books, magazines. That's how you perceive things, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all over the place. And like you said, with the kind of advance of social media, in the past couple of years, it has. I wouldn't say completely, but it has, a lot of it has evolved into more, kind of online scenario, and it's just not really a great situation, right? And like you said, one of the main issues I think is that to everyone, bullying, it kind of means something a little bit different. So you there, you're taking the mick out of someone every single day. You could see that as friendly banter, but the person who's, on the receiving end of that could just see that as, being bullied, which is what it is. And it's a thing that's you really need to kind of educate people more on what it actually kind of consists of, because otherwise then it's more of, I think, getting people to realise what they're actually doing and the consequences of their actions.
And I think it's an important point, because I think that this is where a good communication is really good, because 9 times out of 10, if that person is able to say, look, I'm not comfortable with that, then hopefully that can be stopped before it started. But obviously there's, I think we also need to touch on that is a very subtle form of bullying. Maybe not as noticeable. Exactly. Teachers in a classroom aren't necessarily going to pick up on that. And I think that sometimes, again, it can be subtle. It can eat away at people. But I think also is that, as you said, that sometimes people don't realise they're bullies. Sometimes
people can laugh it off.
Of course they can.
And sometimes
exactly. And I think that you there's always in your friendship groups, it's also quite important that people think you're kind of tough and that you can handle situations. And sometimes if you can't handle it, you kind of bit of bravado. You just pretend that you're all right with it. And I think that's, if you keep doing that, people then push. I mean, there's a reason people bully as well. We've got to understand and accept that people do bully because they could be bullied at home or by other people. It's certainly no excuse, but it certainly can be a reason. And again, also, this is why it's important that we make sure people can raise concerns about bullying, because if they're experiencing difficulty, sometimes what you do is, if you're upset and someone's having a go at you, then you have a go at someone else. Raising the issue for bullies and those that bully, because a lot of what we want to do is we look at preventing bullying, and the reason we want to prevent bullying is because it leads on quite well to sort of what the whole point of this discussion is about the effects of bullying and how people can be impacted on bullying. In your experiences and in general, how have you seen people cope with bullying?
Yeah, well, I mean, coping is, like I said, there's all forms of bullying and there's all forms of coping with it. Like I said, people making snide remarks at you, sometimes you can just laugh it off. People are calling you names, they're like, oh yeah, you laugh it off, you think nothing of it keeps happening. A lot of people can, it can really affect their mental state. They can just get really upset. You can just become untalkative. You can just kind of sit in your classrooms, not really communicating with anyone. You can become scared. There's so many different ways that it can affect you, and it's different with every individual, even if one person's having a specific reaction to it, the same type of bullying that they're receiving could be completely different for someone else. For someone else, they couldn't even see it as bullying. And, like you said, unfortunately, before you knew someone who'd unfortunately taken his own life. And, You know, it's a bit of a drastic thing, but it's still something you've got to talk about, right?
Yeah, I mean
that is.
You can't ignore it. I mean,
it's
not a conversation I want to have, to be perfectly honest. And it raises, memories that I wasn't in this. I actually shared a room. I was at boarding school, shared a room with this chap, and we were friendly, but we weren't best friends. So I'm not going to pretend I was, but it impacted upon me because I felt I should have done something.
Yeah.
But I was only sort of 12, 13 at the time, so I wouldn't have known any different.
Oh, exactly.
And I didn't really realise the full ramifications of it, and at that age you don't. So
well, that's also an effect, isn't it?
Exactly, and that does impact upon things. I mean, I think from my experiences, sort of personally, and working within the field of mental health, is that bullying is not the only cause or the only reason, can contribute to poor mental health. And that can take the form of depression, it can take the form of anxiety, and it can also take the form of self-harm as well. Many people find self-harm as a way of coping with anxiety as part of a coping mechanism, and some people can see that as a positive thing. Obviously, again, we're looking to provide sort of support and websites, etc., within the podcast itself. And I think that when you talk about bullying, you talk about the more subtle side of things. It's the eating away at someone's self-confidence, self-esteem, and that then can impact upon work. It can impact upon exam results. It can affect your sleeping pattern. It can affect your ability to form friendships and relationships. It can. If you're upset, you can then become. If you're being bullied, quite often you'll then take it out on your own family and your own parents. And people aren't always comfortable talking to their parents about bullying. I think we need to acknowledge that. But your parents will always be there for you. Despite how you think and what you think the reaction may be, they're not going to be angry with you if you raise a concern through bullying. Likewise, there will always be someone within the school you can speak to about bullying. Each school's different, and we can't obviously say, who to contact, but we will give you information within the podcast at some point as well.
I mean, I think that's the thing. I don't know who the person at my school was to contact. I have no idea. I still don't know. I don't know what their name was. I don't know even what they looked like. I don't even know if there was anyone I could contact. Same with my school before that. My primary school. My sister, she works, in a school, and she kind of has that role of like the person that you go to when you're being bullied. She's kind of
a pastoral support.
Yeah, that's it.
So in that respect, it's not just about bullying. It's about lifestyle. It's about anything that comes up within school, in school environment, really.
Well, that's her job. And I was on a Zoom call with her, during this pandemic. We can't really meet up, and she just kind of, in passing, mentioned that like 90% of the people in school don't even know who she is.
Why? There was a thing on TV the other day. I'll tell you what it was. It was Ian Wright. Ian Wright went back to his old primary school. And he met up with one of the. It wasn't a teacher. It was a pastoral support worker. And Ian Wright experienced difficulties growing up with his parents. He was quite open about had an abusive relationship with his parents. And I think predominantly more his father. But also had difficulties with mother as well. And school and the support he got from his sports teacher was one of the only things that got him through that. Now at that time, Ian Wright, a lot of people listeners won't know who Ian Wright is. But he's a famous footballer and plays to play for England, and he's commentating on the Euro 2020 now. And he said that without that support, without that motivation, he wouldn't have achieved what he's achieved. So that just underlines it, and then he was so impressed at the fact that the school had a pastoral support worker, and I think you're right. So I think if someone's listening to this, then maybe one of the questions they should be asking the school is, what do I do? Because I asked my daughter, and she's probably less likely to speak to me because she would think that I'd overreact and charge down to school and embarrass her. And she's probably right. Because as a parent, you want to look after your kids. You want the best for them, and you get angry if they are being bullied. But it's not that straightforward, because you kind of got to work out. One of the things we have experienced as a family, and again, my daughter hasn't personally been a bully. I can assure you that. Because we've we've discussed it. We've talked about how it can be perceived, but in social groups that she's been involved with, there has been elements of bullying. More subtle, more exclusion. But that's where I picked up and explained to her, and I was able to talk to her from personal experience to say, look, you might not think this is an issue, but it can be for many people, you know, and that, I think that was kind of a good learning process for her, you know, and for the other girls involved. But then when I spoke to other parents, it was very common. There was a WhatsApp group that someone wasn't involved with, and then someone was deleted from. And it's happening across schools all across the country. And we kind of got to make people aware that it isn't cool, it isn't a good thing to do, and you've got to think, how would you feel if you're that person left out?
I think, honestly, you know, this podcast is kind of supposed to be focusing mainly on the effects that bullying actually bring up, and I think being excluded, you know, if you start at the young age in school, you know, you go into like primary school at whatever age that is, I'm not really familiar, you know, very young, and you're getting excluded from friend groups. You then go up to the next, you know, stage of school. You go in with no friends. You're going to be trying to find other people that don't have friends, and you know, chances are you might not even find any friends. Then when you go into, you know, high school, you don't go in there with any friends. Maybe you do. Maybe it's only a few, but you know, you could get split up with classes and stuff. And if you don't have really experience of having friends, it's going to be quite hard to find more friends once you get to high school. And I think, I mean, that makes you a lot more, you know, like targetable by people who like to pick on people, because you're that kid that doesn't really have any friends. They don't sit with people at lunch times. You walk around alone because you haven't really, you know, you don't have the social skills to really approach like a group of friends and, you know, make a group of friends, because you never have. You know, that's not something that you're really you're not born to know how to make friends, really. And that just escalates because...
Oh, definitely. Know? I mean, I think if one that you know, most people probably have, or I know it's an older film now, but Mean Girls is a classic example of that. You know, that epitomises everything you're saying. And the reality is, and again, I watched a program. My Name is Ray, and everybody loves Ray now, or Raymond or whatever it is, but it doesn't really matter. The program's not important, but what it was important was the fact that they were at high school reunion about 30 years later, and the guy Raymond had been bullied by someone else, and the person that was bullying him thought it was hilarious, and thought, oh, do you remember when I flushed your head down the toilet? What a laugh that was. And then Raymond went, not really, it wasn't something that I really enjoyed, and it made me hate high school. So that kind of, you know, you've got two sides. One person thinking it's all perfectly okay and it's just having a laugh, and another person significantly impacted on, you know. So these are all sorts of things which they're just not acceptable. But and I think it's important to try and work out why some people believe it is accepted to do that. Because, as you say, getting back to the point on the effects, you know, you've got the physical effects. It's like health. You know, your health can deteriorate. You said we've already touched on things like relationships. And you make a really good point, because you know, the way a lot of the work that Spiral does about the group work in schools is identifying the fact that as human beings we need to be part of a group to survive. We need to be part of a group, and as a result of that, we want people to like us. And if people don't like us, that can really affect our mental health.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's what I run a project in Spiral where we do game nights, and I think that's something that I'm really passionate about, is doing, you know, like social activities which, you know, anyone can come to, anyone can enjoy a game, anyone can have a good laugh, because at the end of the day, I think that anyone can really be friends with anyone. I don't really think it's necessarily like, oh, you're not friends with this guy, you never will be. I think if, you know, you get a bunch of people together, sit down at a table, have a good laugh over a board game, you know, drinking a Monster Energy, having a biscuit, I think you can get along with a lot of people, and that can spiral into lots of friend groups, and that's something that I really want to be doing a lot more of, because I think creating groups of friends that, you know, even if you don't stay with them after high school, even if you lose them at college, it kind of creates that knowledge of kind of how to make friends, I guess you would say, and then you can go into college, go into university, you can kind of go to these clubs, make friends, do a lot of things, and I think it's really important to really make people feel involved and make people have a fun time, a good time with each other, and Well,
it creates those good memories, and the reality is if you enjoy school, if you enjoy sort of the time at school, you're more likely to do better. That's generally what studies would suggest, because you've got that platform where you're confident. Now, in general, things like if someone's going to go for a job interview or a university interview or a college interview, what people are looking for is confidence. People are looking, no one's perfect, everyone can improve. But if someone isn't confident in an interview, if someone isn't confident in the classroom or isn't confident, then people are more likely to choose someone that is. Yeah. And I think that confidence is a tough thing, because none of us are happy with everything. Some of us are worried about our bodies. One of the things we bullying and bullying about body, bullying about culture, bullying about religion. These are all sorts of things that significantly impact upon us. Yeah. If your self-image is poor, then you project a poor self-image. And the reality is that no one's got the perfect body, no one's got the perfect haircut, no one's got the perfect clothes. And people should be allowed to be individuals, or people should be able to culturally experiment with what they're confident with, and who is anybody to judge that. But I think it comes back to the point is that the important thing is to understand that what you may perceive as being okay isn't for somebody else. But we also have to accept that other people are also entitled to their opinions. Your opinion, is valid, is important. Other people can disagree with you, and you can disagree with them. Definitely. And that's about having that. This is an area that it gets a bit more complicated. But I think what we've got to sit there and have the conversation is that that's all very well. We can all have disagreements. We can all sort of not agree. We can all have sort of quite forthright views. But at the same time, we've got to accept that if someone doesn't agree with us, we have to accept that you're going to have to disagree. Agree to disagree. Just because you don't agree with someone doesn't mean that you have a right to then stop them from doing whatever they want, or bully them, as the term we're using. Bully them because they don't agree with you. That is something that happens quite regularly as well.
It does, I mean, what you said about confidence is something that I myself found a lot of trouble with. It's confidence, really, and it's a big thing. I went into my first interview for college thinking it's this huge thing. It's like, this is going to be really hard for me, because I kind of struggled a little bit with my confidence, and it's a thing that you would really benefit from, having some self-confidence, before you go to a first job interview. Me personally, I think that if that college interview had been a job interview, then my life would have been completely different, because my confidence just wasn't there, and because it was college, it wasn't really, you don't have to be it's just for an education thing. You don't really have to be the most confident person. You go in there to learn, obviously. And now I feel a lot more confident with myself through doing lots of things online, I've kind of like podcasts where I've kind of put myself out there, and I feel a lot more confident with myself now. And so confidence was a thing that I myself suffered from, and it was from, it was bullying to me, because it happened a lot, but it came from lots of different people, so it wasn't a specific individual. It was just kind of everyone, well, not everyone, but accumulation of a lot of people and a lot of things. And it's just, even small comments you and your friend group, you turn up to something one day and they start having a giggle about your outfit, and you look a bit silly in that, and then you're going home thinking, I thought I looked good in this, all this kind of stuff. And it's not necessarily, it is kind of bullying in a way, but it's not you know what I mean? They didn't intend for it to hurt you. It was just kind of a comment in a friend group. But at the same time, that's an effect of later in life. That was me kind of not specifically thinking of that moment, but lots of little moments like that kind of add up to this thing. And that's something that I think you need to be more aware of when you're kind of making comments about people. I think people just need to be a lot more self-conscious as well as what they're actually saying.
I think you're right. There is definitely a balance, because I think that it's always tricky, isn't it? Because what is that healthy balance? The healthy balance is that as a friendship group, you should be able to have the confidence to say, well, I don't like that, which is fine. But it's then kind of saying, well, just leave it at that, And the thing is also sometimes, it's more important what you don't say. You might not like something, but do you know what? It's none of your business, really. And I think that it is difficult because
Yeah.
you're kind of giving conflicting information there, really. But
Yeah.
I think in that friendship group, I have friendship groups with guys I play rugby with,
Yeah.
and grown up with, and we will mercilessly say horrible things about each other.
Yeah, I mean now that is something that
me
and my friend who do the same thing. Yeah.
We do that, and we're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
But we also know where the line is.
Yeah.
And that, I can't tell you what that line is. I can't tell you what is and isn't acceptable.
But you know when it's not.
But I think at the same time, if it's quite clear, if a person is taking offence, it's not acceptable.
Yeah.
If a person is upset and finds it offensive, then it must stop. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Now, quite often it doesn't. Now, those kind of situations, I don't think we've got any answers for. Is the reality. But an awareness of how it can impact is important. So you think, hang on a minute, next time I think about saying that, maybe I don't say it, maybe I just shut up.
Yeah.
And then just, we'll carry on, and I think that's a good bit of advice. I think it's very different when, it's quite clear that a person's being very specifically targeted, bullied, etc. I think quite often, because it's not just the people that are being bullied that don't want to raise a concern. Yeah. It's also the people that sometimes in friendship groups that know it's wrong, but they don't say anything. Yeah. And it's having the courage in those friendship groups to say, do you know what? I don't agree with what you're doing. Yeah. I think you should stop. Yeah. And do you know what? That's a brave thing to do, but also it's a very important thing to do because if you just sit there and let it happen, unfortunately, whether you realise it or not, you're contributing to that bullying. You have to accept that, and it is difficult. It's difficult to get your head round because you're not doing anything wrong yourself. Yeah. And it's not you that's doing that. But if you don't raise an issue, sometimes you're making the situation worse, whether you're meaning to or not. I think that's important to raise as well.
And I mean, if you realise that later on in life, talking about more about the effects, it's like a ripple effect, right? You were talking about people that you've kind of personally known, and you're thinking about it like, like that's affected you in some sort of a way, right? If I had a friend who had, unfortunately, taken his own life, right? Hypothetically, I wouldn't know how to live with that. I would be like, what could I have done? How come I was friends with this guy? I didn't know this was going on, and this has happened. And I mean, even if it wasn't something as severe as that, even if it was just something as severe as spending the rest of their life, well, not the rest of their life, but being just upset and having some mental issues, and you're there like, I've been friends with this guy, and what have I done that's done this? Yeah. And that would definitely affect me personally.
Or what didn't you do
exactly,
that could have helped? And I think you're right, because this, for me, I was probably too young to realise the full, but it did impact on probably for quite a while. Yeah. And I wouldn't say I blamed myself because I wasn't involved with that. Yeah. But I did feel that I could have maybe said, well, I don't think he's doing okay. Yeah. And I think that in itself was something that would kind of would always make me more likely to raise an issue now.
I think about what we've kind of talked about over this whole thing, and think, do I know anyone who's going kind of through this? Am I going through this? Do I know people who might be doing this to people? Am I personally, doing some of these things to people? And just kind of think about it. Have a bit of a thought on what those impacts actually are, and kind of what we've talked about, what they can actually develop down to later on in life.
You've absolutely nailed it, because all for the conversation we've had, all we're actually doing is saying, look, bullying can take many forms. Yeah. You need to be aware of what you're saying, who you're saying. Obviously we talked about the physical side of things. That seems to be a little bit more clear that it's unacceptable. But also have a conversation in your social groups, in your WhatsApp groups, etc. Just remember to be a little bit more aware of what other people might think. Yeah. Don't exclude people unnecessarily. If you don't want to be friends with someone, don't be friends with them. But don't be friends with them and then exclude them. If you don't agree with something, fine, but don't bully someone because of that. Yeah. If you are someone that is bullying, try to think why. Yeah. Try to understand that it is bullying. Yeah. And at the same time, if you're in a social group where you think it's wrong, talk to someone. Yeah. Talk to a teacher, talk to your parents. Yeah. There will be people that you can advise you. We're going to give you some information about websites and resources you can have a look at. Yeah. We do understand that it does take a bit of bravery to raise awareness, because you're going to think you're going to get in trouble, you think you're going to lose your friends. Do you know what? Decent people will always stick by you if you're doing the right thing. It's as simple as that, you know. We can make no guarantees in life, of course. That's not what we're saying. But what we are saying is that someone's more likely to think higher of you if you're trying to look out for you and your friends than if you let someone else be bullied. And it may not. We're not suggesting for a minute that you are doing the bullying, but if you don't raise something with the right person, then how is that going to stop? You know, and likewise, if people do understand the effects of bullying and why people bully, and also how it impacts upon somebody, then maybe you're less inclined to do it. You know, and at the same time, you know, make sure you know to contact. If the school isn't making it clear, we'll raise that with your form sheet and say, well, look, hang on a minute, you said you didn't know who it was. Well, what children should know. You know, it's as simple as that.
I think I even had a meeting with them at one point, you know, thinking about it, and even then, you know, I never saw them around school again, I never saw this and that, and I think that's also something that's important. It's also a topic for another time. Because we're going to do more of these definitely, and explore more topics and deeper and darker lengths. This is the first one we've done, and I mean, I've had a great time.
Me too. Well, thanks very much. As I said, you know, if you've got any suggestions, then please sort of feel to drop us a line.
Definitely.
And
we'll talk about anything.
Absolutely
anything.
And hopefully that's helpful. As I said, you know what, we're not turning around giving you all the answers. What we're doing is we're trying to make you think and trying to make you aware of the reason why it's important to understand the effects of bullying.
Spiral provides support to young people aged 8 to 25 across Cumbria. If you are experiencing issues around bullying, including increased anger, low mood and anxious thoughts, you can possibly access our one-to-one support. Or if you are a young person feeling lonely, you can access Spiral's peer community. Just go to www.spiralcumbria.org.uk, where there is more information on the services Spiral provides, including resources for parents.